transfer portal window is open now. This is a program that has really been active there, especially this year. I believe they brought in 7 guys. You had the 3 offensive linemen. You had Ernest Hausman. You had Josiah Stewart. You had Jack Tuttle, A.J. Barner, Miles Hinton, Ladarius Henderson, and Drake Nugent. All guys that they've been able to kind of pick up via the portal and backfill some needs on the roster. A couple guys we think will start. Now comes the second window, the post-spring window, where guys maybe get an early indication on where they sit on the depth chart and maybe they decide to move on. Last year, Michigan added a transfer in Iabioki 13 or 15 days before the season started. So I know the window is there right now. You got to get your name in the portal, but there are guys that are probably going to be available for you the rest of the offseason. So kind of impossible to go through names right now. So what we wanted to do was kind of go take a look at position groups. So we'll start by positions that might have guys coming in. And I guess however you guys want to go, whether it be Chris, Clayton, take your pick. I guess we'll just start with Chris. When you look at the position groups on this roster that maybe could use another body or two, I think we kind of all have said that it's the cornerback group, but interested on your take and where things stand there and where do you think they might go in addressing needs?
Yeah.
The roster.
First things first, I know that Michigan, for example, last year we said, hey, they're going to get some help in the transfer portal from a defensive player, a defensive lineman, and it was Oki, and we knew it in the spring. He just had to take some classes before he arrived in the fall. So we were aware of it at least, and it's kind of the same thing on the basketball side, right? If a kid hasn't announced, but there are like strong rumblings out there, then it's probable that he has a little bit of work to do, or maybe they didn't want to announce it until they made sure he got in. Some kids announce on their own and they say, hey, you know what, I decided I'm going to Michigan, and then later find out, oops, you know what, I couldn't get in. So, or wasn't able to get in. So that's something. Number 2, yeah, for sure, it's the corners, right? And there are already a couple in there. I think a kid named Jaden Davis, if I'm not mistaken. Is he from the SEC, did I see? A cornerback. There's another kid from Oregon as well that I think, you know what, if you're Michigan and you've got all these pieces and you can go in and you can tell a kid you're our missing piece, like they did with Olu Oluwatimi to a championship team. We want to plug you in and you're going to be our guy. That's an unbelievable sell, especially with the NIL having gotten better. So I think that's one. I think that there was an elite receiver out there that wanted to come. I think you kick the tires on that and say, hey, you know what, if we can get a game breaker, I'm not sure that's going to happen. And you don't bring in somebody just to bring in somebody when you've got the depth that they do at that position. So those are the 2 that I kind of think about more than any. You look at the interior defensive line, fantastic. You look at the edges, with Josiah Stewart coming in, fantastic. Tight ends group is pretty deep. You look at the offensive line, that's so deep. Running backs, deep. So you guys tell me, man. Clay, I can't think of anybody else. Oh, a kicker, obviously, or a special teams guy. And I think you will see them. Take a peek and see what's in there as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was going to add. I agree on that, where you could bring in a guy with the same pitch. Like you're the missing piece. Do you want to make those clutch kicks that could send a team to the college football playoff or win a team a national championship? I was just reading an article so Jake Moody was mocked by Dane Brugler of The Athletic to the Dallas Cowboys. And then I'm reading, because the Cowboys need a kicker. We all saw what happened in the playoffs last year. And they're saying, like, hey, there's not much to worry about Moody. He's going to be reliable. He has made a bunch of clutch kicks in his career. That's valuable when you're trying to be a kicker and go to the next level. Only 2 kickers are projected to go in the NFL draft by Dane Brugler, one of them being Jake Moody at the highest. So that could be something that you look at right there, a guy that could come in, provide a little bit of help. Maybe then you give Tommy Doman, Adam Samaha a year to figure out the combination of those 2, who's going to do what duties. Would imagine Samaha in a year or 2 could take over the place kicking duties. But corner, wide receiver, I agree. I will say this, though, about this transfer portal window, and we had a great question from Schaub Fam as well on the live chat here. He says, is the spring portal window generally a lot quieter? Feel like I'm not hearing much so far. Well, for one, this is the first spring transfer portal window ever. So, they have kind of split it up here, but I think it's going to be. There was over 1,300 players that entered the transfer portal in the December-January window, according to Matt Zenitz of On3. First day of the portal opening was Saturday. Only 85 guys went in. So it's going to be a lot quieter. I will say I think there's going to be more as spring games end. Guys have a chance to sit down with their coaches and their parents and, their families and things like that. But I think it is going to be a lot quieter. It's only 2 weeks. So I don't think there's going to be a ton of top talent out there. But if you find a guy and you pursue him, you're right, CB. I mean, what a pitch you have, in front of you. And it worked for guys like Miles Hinton even. I know he has the ties here. He's not even going to start this year, I wouldn't expect. And he's fine with waiting a year, maybe next year, because this program right now is so strong. So you have a hell of a pitch.
AB, I would add one thing. I think a lot of these things will probably be back channeled as well, right? You might not hear about something, and then the next day, boom, somebody's announcing that they're transferring to Alabama or Georgia or Michigan or something like that, because these things tend to get in the works behind the scenes, and whether it's I'm not going to call it tampering, but people talk. Maybe it's high school coaches, maybe it's some kid's trainer or something like that. People know who's going to the transfer portal and who's going to be available.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I'll stop short of calling it shady, but a lot of these things go far before and far after the transfer portal announcement. So you always take that with a grain of salt. There could be someone available that we don't even know that is maybe people at Michigan even expect to come that we don't even have on our radar yet. So something to keep in mind. It's not the best comparison, but when one of you guys brought up the wide receivers, it intrigued me because it made me go think remember a guy like Jamison Williams, who transfers out of Ohio State. He only had, I went and looked it up. He only had 15 catches his first 2 years in Columbus.
Wow.
He transfers. It was in, what was the date here? April 28th, 2021. He transfers he enters the transfer portal, commits to Alabama 5 days later. Again, probably something through back channels they knew was going to happen. But those are the type of guy, he was, not a 5-star recruit. He was a top 100 guy. But, some of those guys, maybe you bring in someone who has been underused at another school and all of a sudden he pops in your offense. I'm not saying there's a Jamison Williams out there. That could apply to any number of positions when it comes to wide receivers, cornerbacks, what have you. So we'll see what happens there. Again, I look at the roster, just about every single position group. I still have questions about quarterback, but I don't think that's going to be something they address through there. They like the guys that they have behind J.J. McCarthy, so they look set there. Cornerback
they just added
be
a quarterback.
The one.
They just added one like 10 minutes ago.
Well, see,
Harvard.
This thing dates itself. That thing dates itself already. So quarterback room does get another arm. What's his Jack Messner? Was that the name?
Jack Grusser, same thing. From Harvard, 2023 kid is headed to Michigan. Decommits from Harvard, so I assume he'll sign soon. But
what do you mean, 2023 kid? A true freshman?
Yeah, looks
like a
New
preferred
Jersey.
walk-on.
Preferred walk-on. Okay.
Yeah, I would guess so.
Interesting.
And
well, you know what? You know what? You upgrade the education, number one, right? Going from Harvard to Michigan, and the football's a lot better. So there you have it. It's a no-brainer.
Yeah, so we'll see. Already some movement there on Michigan's roster for this upcoming season. A little more competition in there for fall camp. I want to go on the other side of things now. I just spoke about how deep this roster is in a lot of spots, and especially I've been going by position group, looking at all the scholarship guys, and there are a few spots where there's a lot of competition, and not just for a spot on the 2 deep. Maybe you're not even in the top 3 or 4 at your position. So I want to, again, don't want to speculate names because it's disrespectful to guys that have decisions to make. And I think if you go through the roster, you kind of might know who some of those guys are. But position groups on this roster where we think with this window open now, we maybe see a couple departures. Immediately, the one that pops out to me is the offensive line. I think they're probably 10, 11, 12 deep there right now. Once you factor in the guys that, there are guys on this team that played last year that probably won't get much playing time. There are guys that weren't on the team last year that could start at a spot or two. So offensive line sticks out to me. What is something where's a spot for you guys that you think we might see some movement?
We saw Lorenzetti move to defensive line, right? I believe in the spring. So that made a little bit of room. It wouldn't surprise me at all to see an interior lineman move on And I think that's probably going to happen. You're right. The numbers, it's just unbelievable. I was stunned, frankly, when they took 2. I thought, okay, 1 offensive lineman, that sounds good, because they're always talking about how deep they are there. And then to take 2, like they did with Ladarius Henderson and Miles Hinton, it's like, wow, okay.
3.
Yeah, 3. The third is, the third being Nugent. Yeah, so it's crazy to me. So I do think you'll see somebody move on. I do think you'll see the quarterback room thin out a little bit. So keep an eye on that. And it wouldn't surprise me at all. I'm looking at wide receiver and I'm looking at linebacker potentially that might move on. And there have been rumblings about these guys for a while, at different positions. So we'll see what happens. But like you said, AB, it's not for us to break it or to speculate on these guys that might be leaving, because guys change their minds. We can go out there and we can say, hey, this guy's leaving, and then he decides to change his mind and comes back, and then you created a tizzy for no reason. So I remember Zach Gentry. I wrote this article about 2 weeks ago or a week and a half ago, said if there had been a transfer portal back then with 1 year, he'd have been gone 4 times over, and he's thankful that he didn't. So now he's working on another contract at Pittsburgh as a tight end when he wanted to play quarterback. So that's why you kind of let these things play out. But I like it, and I don't like it. It's unfortunate because a lot of these kids, it used to be, you stick it out, and even if you don't play a lot, or if football's not your future, then you can still get the education and everything else. But of course now too, kids are graduating in 3 years too, so that gives them opportunities to go 2 years elsewhere as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny because the way this has gone, I mean, with thousands of kids entering the quote-unquote portal and all this stuff, it used to be a couple kids transfer, and it was like, what is going on at Michigan? I mean, what the hell is happening over there where they got these kids, it's a mass exodus, and it's kind of fun when it's like a team you don't like as much, and you can kind of play that game without like being too serious about it. Now it's like it's healthy. I mean, for one, Michigan has over 100 players that at one point either signed a national letter of intent or were on scholarship here after being a walk-on. So, I mean, from a numbers standpoint, it seems like they would need to get down a little bit. So I would expect there to be a handful of guys that leave. You guys mentioned some of the position groups. Probably the most deep ones would be the ones you would look at. I mean, I'd say probably other than Cade and Eric All, one of the guys that was not surprising, but maybe the most disappointing was George Rooks back in December or January, whenever he left. But those are just going to happen. A young guy that maybe doesn't want to wait his turn as much, that's just going to happen these days. And that's why I think, going back to your point, CB, about what they did on the offensive line, it's so smart if you're Sharon Moore, if you're Jim Harbaugh in Michigan. You're pretty deep at offensive line. But, hey, we don't know what these guys are going to do these days. Look at what basketball is going through with Hunter Dickinson. You got to recruit and just find the best players, let the ones that want to be there compete, and then pretty much go from there. So, they've kind of baked in a little bit of being able to solidify some of those position groups with some of those additions they made back during the early period, all 7 of those guys. So, I think we'll see a handful. I think probably, you would think this week would be the biggest movement for a lot of those guys. Michigan's been out of spring ball for a while. If they don't transfer by in like 11 days or whenever, 10 days roughly, then they're going to find themselves in New York and in Washington, D.C. with the team they don't want to be on. So I would expect some of that to happen this week.
Yeah, it's so crazy to think about. God, I haven't even thought about those type of bits lately where, see Jim Harbaugh wears on his guy. Look at all these guys that are leaving. And it's like the 6th-string linebacker that never played or some walk-on. God, I kind of miss it, actually. I like the drama. There hasn't been a lot of drama. I should be careful what I wish for. We had a pretty packed first few months of the year, but I think other spots I would look at. I think one of you guys may have hit on it. Running back. I think there's probably a guy or two there. Even if you just follow the participation chart of the spring game, where it's a little bit obvious, who might have an opportunity elsewhere. Again, there are always injuries and stuff too, so don't want to put too much weight into what we actually saw publicly. But that's a good thing. I like the way that Clay put it, in that it speaks to the health and the competition on the roster. I mean, guys want to come here, guys want to compete, and also the guys that don't, or the guys who feel slighted. Now if there's NIL, maybe you go a little closer to home and make a little money and start for a little, a lesser Power 5 or a high major school, and you're able to, find those opportunities.